Hello, my friends. Welcome back to BIMvoice. Today I have the pleasure to talk to Nico Arellano from Canada. Hi, Nico. How are you doing?
It's a great pleasure to be here in your podcast. I have been following your podcast for maybe a year or so, and it's unreal to be here. Like, I feel very humbled to be here after so many inspiring people that you have as guests. So thank you so much.
That's so nice to hear. Then that means that you have a quite inspiring story as well to
I
be here.
hope
No, I'm just
I
kidding.
hope somebody, if somebody can get inspired by anything I say, I will be honored. But yeah.
Yes. I'm very happy to have you here and learn more about what you are doing, because I really believe what you are doing is quite interesting and definitely well deserved for anyone else to know about it. So let's go slowly about this. Tell us a few words about yourself, and then let's dive into what you are going to tell us today.
Sure. Okay. So yeah. So you said that I'm from Canada, so I have a Canadian citizenship, like recently acquired, but I am from Chile, from Santiago, South America, and I study there. I am an architect by background, so I study there in Universidad Católica of Chile, and after I finished my studies, I did like a certificate, a diploma on BIM, BIM projects. And then I got married and moved to Canada. Like that was like maybe almost 8 years ago. And when I moved to Canada, when you move to a new place, you are open to do whatever work you can find. And I was lucky enough to be hired in an architectural firm, really nice one. It was great. I was going to do BIM. I was hired because I knew BIM, but when you start working on a firm and you are the new person, they are going to give you all of the stuff that nobody wants to do, of course. So so I had in my mind that all of this idea about BIM being this amazing, super sophisticated, parametric, collaborative, interoperative process to maybe improve the AEC industry. And then I am there in this studio doing the most repetitive and mundane task, like, okay, we have this campus, 10 buildings, and you have to go and rename each room one by one. And I was like hours and hours doing that job. And what was the logic of it? For example, okay, my manager would say, okay, you have to find the intersection of grids A2, put that into the room number, and then the level, and then the wing in which that room was. So it was so robotic. And somebody, like a colleague by then, Kirk Stocky, a really good friend of me, told me, hey, have you heard about Dynamo? I'm like, what the hell? So yeah, basically all of those instructions that the manager is giving to you, you can give those instructions back to Revit. So I'm like, okay. So I started playing with that, and I realized that the computer should be doing those things, not humans. We should be doing more creative things, more like better things with our minds than doing those repetitive stuff.
Definitely.
So I started like little by little programming, or like this is visual programming. So it's a little more like a path. You are putting inputs and outputs on boxes. It's not like writing code. But then I started doing some script for different tasks, and then I started getting better. They gave me more responsibility, so I started writing a lot of scripts for many different tasks, automating a lot of things. Then I realized that, okay, in order to do BIM well, you need to start crafting, or you need to start managing the tools well. So before, for me, BIM was just Revit or ArchiCAD or any of those big software, but I didn't realize that BIM was way more than that. And when I started playing with programming tools, I understood that if you cannot manage well the tools, it's really hard to manage the whole process. A year after that, this friend of mine, Kirk, invited me to teach a BIM course. So it was BIM, like everything about BIM, and also a tutorial about Revit on a college. I did that for 4 years. So I was like teaching BIM to the students and everyone. And there is an old paradox that says that fish don't know that they are wet because they are so used to the water that they don't realize that they are in this medium. And I felt the same in BIM. Like we are so used to this software that works so well, that are powerful and are are beautiful that we don't realize that it doesn't need to be like that. So I say, okay, I have to start learning about this, about like software and about tools and about like all of the systems that we use in order to get a better result with BIM. So I joined Carleton University Master. This was like 5 years ago. I did a year of master and then I jumped into the PhD because I really like researching about this. And my supervisor, Professor Stephen Fay, invited me to work at this amazing lab that is called Carleton Immersive Media Studio, SIMS. And I have been like working there like as a team lead for large BIM projects for many years. And now, so like 4 years. And basically I started researching about that. That was my research, like what are the skills that we need in order to master the tools that we use? Because otherwise we have too many layers that separate us from the object, which is, the buildings or our cities or whatever. And when that happens, when there is a disconnection between the creative process, the architect or whoever AC professional is behind that computer and the object, the building, the city, etc., that's when we start getting like in trouble, and that's why our industry is so it's in problem, Yeah. So just to wrap up, as I was saying, I was very comfortable with the software that I was using. I was happy with Dynamo and the way we were managing the projects. And of course, because these were large asset information models, for example, the Parliament of Canada, the whole campus of Carleton University with more than 50 buildings. So these models started to get like very big and complex. And then our tools started to become like too many issues. We had to find too many ways around. And around 2 years ago, a colleague of me told me, have you heard about open source stuff? I never heard about that. This is crazy. I never heard about that. I'm like, what is that? So read about this Free Software Foundation, read about this Eric Raymond and the open source initiative, or the Cathedral de Bazaar, or the GNU project, the 4 freedoms for the user of software, all of those things. I was like, this is insane. Like, how nobody told me about this when I was a student, when I had all the time in the world, and when I didn't have like a family. So I started getting very obsessed about that, started reading about the Dion Wood blog, where he's very critical about the vendors, and I was reading about that. I was like going nuts. and then I learned about Blender BIM. I was like, this is insane. And then All-Star Community was also created about that time. So I was like very looking into that. And at the end of that year, I find IFCJS. So Antonio, I think it was maybe in your podcast or somewhere else that I heard an interview of Antonio. I'm like, this is too good. This is too amazing. So yeah, so I started playing with that. I also participated in a hackathon by Speckle. So you also had Dimitri and Matteo here. And I took some courses on computer science in the university, and then the IFCJS people launched the IFC crash course, and then after that we started getting so much momentum, like learning about HTML, CSS, JavaScript, 3JS, IFCJS, etc. And now we are in the advanced, like now our lab is a patron, Sims Lab is a patron of IFCJS. So many researchers in my lab are doing the class course, and then me and other researchers are doing the advanced front end, which has been really, really, really amazing for our projects.
That sounds very, very cool. Looks like you are very excited and fired up by the new technology, like me. It's really cool to see other people. I'm sure you know about Twin as well, right? You are also waiting for that to take over. So we are heading into a very, very interesting year, 2023. Yeah. I can't wait to find out the names of the companies, and really looking forward to that. It's going to be very, very cool.
Definitely, yeah. Like, so I hope they release that list soon, and we learn more about that project, because next year is going to be really fun for that project for sure.
What do you want to do? What do you want to achieve with all this open source? How do you feel about open source now, after 2 years after you heard about it and immerse yourself into this? What is your feeling right now regarding it?
So in one of the blogs, I was mentioning me reading the Moods blogs, and in one of those readings, I read the term black box BIM, okay, and I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense, because I was like, okay, so what is a black box? A black box is pretty much is a system that you can only know in terms of its inputs and outputs, but which process is opaque and is unknown for the users. So I was like, okay, this is exactly what we're doing with BIM, you know, this is exactly what we are doing, and it's crazy. We don't know the process, and all our creative work and process cannot be driven through an opaque system that we cannot control. So after I was thinking about that, I was like, okay, what I really want from my research is to help to de-black box. So that's the name of my research, de-black box BIM. And in order to dream about that, or in order to get closer to that goal, two conditions must be met. Okay, the first one that is very important is that the tools that we use must be open source, which means that the code, or the instructions that help you to interact with the software need to be accessible, readable, like in a human readable language, and we should be able to understand it and read it. And the second condition, of course, that's the first one. The second condition is obvious. We need to understand what we're reading, because if, for example, Autodesk decide to open source all of their stuff, and we go and look at the code source and we don't understand anything, we're in the same position that before. You know, we don't do anything. So the second condition is that we need to educate ourselves and our communities in coding literacy, you know. So I was like, okay, how can I tackle? I know this is very ambitious, but how can I tackle these two approaches? The first one is the one that I have been doing with these open source communities. So participate in the communities, try to spread the word, try to help them. If you don't know coding, because right now I feel that I'm in a beginning position, but you can help with talking about the platform, or you can maybe help them with some bounties, things like that, and make sure that the tools that we use are open source, you know, because of what I was saying before. The second one is education. So make sure that, for example, more people know about coding and know how to interact and master the tools. And for that, I am thinking about, for next year, creating like a course, like a coding course for undergrad students in Carleton University. And so where we can like give them awareness, or like make them critic about the tools that we use in early their career, you know. So something that I think is really wrong is that in a school we teach them BIM and Revit at the same time, instead of like make them aware that this is a medium that we have to control first, or master first. So yeah, so with those two conditions, it's possible to de-black box BIM. And why I think it is important to de-black box BIM? This goes to the definition by Building Smart International. When they define openBIM, they define a list of values, for example, interoperability, collaboration, transparency, vendor neutral, etc. So they put a list of values that openBIM requires to have. Mm-hmm. And when I look at the way we are working with BIM, so with closed BIM basically, or with proprietary BIM, all of those values is impossible to get them. You know, it's impossible to interoperate, impossible to collaborate with the ways that with closed format, for example. So so if we think openBIM is a good thing, I think we must promote and pursue open source tools. And finally, something that also I think I heard from somebody from the open source art group is that all of those values that Building Smart defined as openBIM is exactly what BIM was originally made for. So having to come with a word, with a term that is called openBIM of something that was supposed to be open by default is wrong. We should be
It's a bad start. It's something negative.
We should call this closed BIM, and then the other thing is BIM. Everything is open, you know. And so yeah, that's. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's why it's important for me, open source.
So you are working in this project, the black box BIM. You will be working for 2 years, or how much time do you have on this project?
So ideally, I want to keep doing my PhD forever. no, but as soon as they kick me out, no. This is my 4th year of PhD. I am finishing the courses this term, and then I have to write my thesis, and my thesis is about it. And in Carton, we have this thing that we call the epistemic object. So basically, you write your theory and all of your your knowledge base, and then you create a project or an object that kind of like supports. It's like the pragmatic version of your theory.
Okay.
And for me, I am working at Sims with a team of people, creating this thing that we call the bespoke web-based open source platform. So bespoke because it's custom made, you know, it's made exactly for us. When we use like vendor tools, we download like 30 gigas or features that maybe you're not going to use. In this case, we want to use the features that we exactly want for our project. And then it needs to be web-based because we don't want the users of the platform to have to download any software, just use their mother browser. And we want it open source for, again, to make it community-based, to make it easy to debug. We also want it to be free for users, etc. And so that's kind of like the idea of the project. And with that idea, Bespoke Online, the open source platform, we have like different projects. One of them, for example, is the digital campus that right now we have it online. People can access to it and see all of the IFCs on Mapbox, so on this GIS or map renderer. And we are working on something that we call the Imagine Canada Digital Twin. That is it's like a larger project based on the written digital twin. But in our case, we want to make it free and open source. So we're thinking about how can we make that, making connection with other provinces, with people in Montreal, with people in Kingston, people in Toronto, to try to make a digital twin for Canada, but accessible. So again, like maybe that's a long conversation that we can have another day, but it's a very interesting project, and it's based on all of these tools. So Mapbox or MapLibre, IFCAS, TreeAS, MongoDB. So it's putting a lot of different libraries together to make this product that we're having a lot of fun making.
That sounds very interesting. We'll definitely have a look at that someday. No doubt about it. Let me ask you something about, you mentioned about these 2 things that you think are important to the black box BIM, but there is more to it. Let's say that your thesis is a success. Then how do we manage to roll out this for the entire Canada or the entire world? What other measures could we take to open this BIM, which was supposed to be open in the first place?
In my opinion, it is very important to follow standards, because when your work, when you think that you can do your work in a unique way, and then for people it's really hard to understand the workflow and participate, that's not very easy to scale and to maintain. So we have been trying to be very careful or very systematically following standards. So for example, one of the standard that we try to follow is the ISO standard, and ISO has like many different series, but of course 19650 is very important to follow. 19650 has a whole chapter about openBIM and open data, how they call it. So yeah, so that is very important to follow name conventions, and again, like any other type of open standards. For example, as I was mentioning, IFC for us is very important. Maybe it's not perfect. Some people critique IFC a lot, but it's, in my opinion, the best we have to collaborate. So stick to the open standards, If we are going to do data, for example, stick to JSON. If we're going to do GIS, stick to GeoJSON and GLTF, so try to be mindful about that all of the little pieces that we're doing need to be standardized and it needs to be open.
There is a challenge with this. I remember from previous talks I had with other guests from Canada or US that actually is quite a challenge regarding these standards, because most of the clients in their requirements, they just say you need to deliver the Revit file or the X file, right? They do not even think about IFC or open standards. How do we deal with this?
Well, it's hard to change the industry. This industry is really slow in like acquiring change. So one like little contribution that we can do is start from our projects, like try not to create a new set of standards every time that we create a project, but try to follow the ones that exist already. That's why ISO is important, International Standard Organization, I think it is, because those are conventions, those are agreements of a lot of players that have sit together and say, okay, how can we contribute to make this industry more, to have more better communication within the industry,
But I mean, how do we persuade these clients, these asset managers, these asset owners to specify and to enforce openBIM or their projects? Is it true that in Canada right now, is this what is the business as usual, like for requirements to be required to deliver Revit files and so on? And then what is needed actually? Education is one of the things, but what more can we do maybe to help these clients to understand the value and not only understand, to try to require openBIM, right? And I don't expect you to have a silver bullet solution. I'm just wondering, do you have any ideas how can we tackle this?
That's a really good point, Petru, because that's also one of the triggers in my research that says, hey, this is important. You have to work on this. And when I started to hear about the mandates that different countries or different governments are, like requiring AEC professionals to follow. So, for example, when you say, okay, there are BIM mandates, or there are, for example, BIM level 2 in Great Britain in 2016. So you say, okay, what this means is that BIM is not just an option. It's not something that you can choose to do or not to do. More and more, the governments are like requiring you to use this. So when this stops to be an option, it could be dangerous, because you say, okay, if I don't use BIM, that means that I cannot participate in a public conversation. For example, I cannot participate in public work, and that kind of like limitates your field of work. So when that happens, when BIM starts to become a mandate and not an option, it's really important that we really understand it and do it well. And when, of course, we know that, I don't want to start talking about the big companies, but we know that there is like there exists some monopoly practices in the big vendor in our industry, and that means that, okay, when you have to pay $3,000 for a one user license for a software that we are using, that means that maybe for a small firm, 20-30% of their revenue is going to be spent in paying licenses, and that shouldn't be right. And the only way of participating in a public work in Canada is like that, in other countries like that. I have a list of many countries that are adding the BIM mandates, and BIM mandates in many countries means either Revit mandate or so yeah, it shouldn't be like that. And you were asking me if I have any idea of how can we show that it is important. It's just showing that we can do great things with open source or with non-proprietary tools. So if that happens, if we can, I don't know, manage to be professional, to be competitive using alternative tools, maybe some people are going to start following. And maybe you need like a initial investment of hiring people that know code, etc. Maybe that investment is less than paying like the millions of dollars in software licenses that we are used to right now.
Yeah, that sounds like something good to start with. Follow good examples. I would add to that. We are not trying to break the ice here. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. This is already happening, guys, in Norway, in Finland, in Denmark, in Sweden, maybe a bit lesser, but yeah, maybe it's happening there as well. This is not something in the concept phase or something like that. In Norway, it's in the phase of implementing it by as much as possible clients and asset owners, asset managers. It's not a trial and error phase anymore, it's implementation phase, right?
I like people that take action about this, because we know in 2020 a lot of big firms send a letter to Autodesk saying, hey, we are really pissed about the tools, and then Autodesk say, okay, but this is the way it is, so deal with it or leave, you know. And then nothing happened, and in 2022 I think the Danish letter, we're still waiting for answers. What is going to happen with all of these things that we asked for. And yeah, so one approach is to keep writing letters so the industry gets fixed from a top-down approach, or other people like Antonio, Jesus, and Dion, and you know, all of these guys building the solution from bottom up. I think I like that approach more, so I'm going to keep trying to collaborate with them and spread the word that this is the right approach, in my opinion.
Yeah, nobody will give any 2 cents on the letters because they are just making too much money about it. So yeah, it is what it is. And something else, I'm not delusional. I don't think it's possible to de-black box BIM overnight and 100%. Like, these tools will still be here for a long time unless something really radical, disruptive changes, like the OpenAI bot chat and everything, like something crazy like that comes and can have a huge impact. You never know, but realistically speaking, I think that should not be our aim to replace everything. That would be crazy. But what I think is most important here is to have options. It's a very bad situation where you do not have options. I think this should be the ideal goal. And who wants to look for alternatives to have these alternatives in place? That's the most important thing, because not everyone will be willing to look for alternatives, and that is perfectly fine. Not everyone needs to do it, right? But for those interested, it's a real shame that they don't have any alternatives right now. Because you worked so many years in BIM, what advice would you give to somebody who is newly finishing his life as a student and starting looking for a job, or for somebody else like an architect or an engineer who is working in this industry but not with BIM? What would you recommend them to do to get into a BIM career path?
This is a tricky one, because when you are looking for a job, a lot of firms ask you to have in your toolbox to know software really well, and to have experience using the software. And I think that's problematic, because if eventually the software changes or there is something, then you don't have anything else to offer. So I would say, okay, software are important, learn them. They are good. They can help you to do your work better if you know how to use them. But the most important thing is to understand the processes. So what is the process of BIM? Because building information modeling is not only a thing, it's also like a process. And it is really important to understand what it is, what is the value, what are the problems that it has, and understand, like, in that sense, not only in the sense of the technology that you're using. So some people really think that Revit or that BIM is actually Revit, and in my opinion, that's limiting, or that they put in their resume, like, okay, I know Revit, Twinmotion, and Lumion, and blah blah. But I think again, if that firm do like a technology change, you'll have to learn everything from scratch. No, it's there. Try to learn the processes. Try to learn things that are more standardized, and I think that will facilitate things when you want to understand a different technology.
Even if I don't like it, if you see that in job posts, you see like 90% of them are requiring Revit, just do a course, it's fine. You need to start somewhere and then build on that, but don't rely only on that. It's always good to have something at the base that you can land on, that you do 80% of your tasks, but at the same time provide more value by doing these things that you are talking about, these things that not everyone is doing, right? And this way, more opportunities will also open to you, because now you learn Revit and you are going to be a BIM technician or a BIM modeler, right? But there are more things you can do. You can become a BIM coordinator, BIM manager, right? For that is definitely not enough. Although in some big organizations it might be enough, just being a Revit guide, a Revit BIM manager, because there are so many tasks, right? But in general, not necessarily. Now depends also in your location and how they work and so on. Yeah, we'll leave it at this, Nico. It was very nice to have you. Thank you very much for joining me. Now, please tell me how somebody can reach out to you if they are interested to ask you something or to connect with you.
So first, they can reach me through my LinkedIn. So it's Nico Arellano at LinkedIn, I think, or linkedin.com. Also, I don't know if I can give you my Sims email address, and then also like if you can take a look at the Sims projects that we are doing, because we have like a big range of different projects that are really interesting. So yeah, we really like to collaborate with different actors. So if you like what we do, like don't be shy and reach out to us, and we'll be glad to initialize any conversation. And finally, Petru, thank you so much for the time and for the invitation. It's been a pleasure to talk to you as usual.
Thank you very much and good luck. Deep black boxing BIM.